Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Nirvana Day service. A special aloha to Reverend Christina Moon for flying from Oahu to join us in person today as our guest speaker. Nirvana Day is an observant of Shakyamuni Buddha's Memorial Day. As explained by Reverend Blaine Higa, Shakyamuni awakened to truth and became a Buddha at the age of 35. After sharing the Dharma for the next 45 years, he attained perfect enlightenment in the Parinirvana with his death at age 80. Nirvana Day is one of the 3 observances commemorating the remarkable life of Shakyamuni Buddha, the other 2 being his birthday on April 8th and his awakening on December 8th. I am Margaret Masunaga, and I will serve as your MC today. Assisting Reverend Blaine at the temple with technical support are Alan Matsumoto, Stephen Kaneko, and Wendy Terada. Corinne Chong is our organist, and Betty Takioka will lead the singing. Let us start the service with offering of flowers by Mary Katayama and her daughter Nancy Ann. Offering of lights will be done by Janet Lidner and Mildred Kaneko. Please rise. Reverend Blaine will now lead us in the Vantana and Tisarana. Let us sing both the Pali and English parts together with him. For those of you on Zoom, please be sure you have your microphone muted on your computers. Thank you.
Butsunamanda, 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 Butsunamanda.
Please remain standing as Reverend Blaine will now share aspiration.
We gather this morning as friends in the Dharma, as fellow travelers along the journey of life. On this observance of Nirvana Day, we mark the passing of Shakyamuni Buddha into parinirvana, or complete and perfect enlightenment. As he lay under the twin sala trees nearing the fulfillment of his human existence, he shared the final teaching with his disciples. Make of yourselves a light, rely upon yourself, do not depend upon anyone else. Make my teachings your light. My disciples, the teachings that I have given are never to be forgotten or abandoned. They are always to be treasured. They are to be thought about. They are to be practiced. If you follow these teachings, you will always be happy. Let us endeavor to listen to the Buddha Dharma with not just our ears, but with our entire being, and strive to embody the teachings in our thoughts, through our words, and by our actions. May we always take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows us the way in this life, the Dharma, the way of understanding and love, and the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Entrusting the dynamic activity of all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion, we call the honored name of Amida, the Buddha of infinite light and life, in gratitude, joy, and awareness for the enlightenment in the life to come. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda.
Please be seated. It is now time for offering of incense. We will invite all Sangha members in attendance to please come up and offer incense if you wish, starting with the front rows and moving towards the back. Please use both incense burners. Thank you. Let us observe a moment of silent meditation.
Namandab, 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 namandab.
Reverend Blaine will now lead us in the chanting of the sutra Sambutsuge. Words can be found on page 47 in the red Jodo Shinshu service book and on your screen. Again, it's page 47.
The Buddha of infinite light and life made vows to embrace all beings equally without exception. These vows promise to create a perfect world where no suffering or evil exists and guides us to supreme awakening. The Sambutsuge, or hymn in praise of the Buddha, is a poem from the larger Pure Land Sutra in which Amida Buddha, as a bodhisattva, makes his 48 vows to establish the Pure Land of Enlightenment for the happiness and the welfare of all beings. We chant the words of the Buddha as a reminder of these great vows of compassion made to liberate and to awaken all. Sambutsuge. 生特部不行志願一切空一茶大安慶始有仏薬千億万無量大小修行語者供養一切使徒勝負不尿具道検証不逆非尿語者小分世界無不影無種仙道光明師匠変師諸国尿税精進異人難女両がサブ国土第一老主奇妙道場超絶国尿内音理無闘争大東愛民道達一切解破来生新年少女伊藤学国下落安穏公文神妙税が神書本願の日力少所欲解剖生存知恵無下上領子孫知が信行計量心死食毒中画行精進年中不敬ナマンナムナマンナムナマンナムナマンナムナマンナムナマンナム何にしぐどく平等性際道本もないしおうじょうあなこナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダ
Please rise for the Gatha Evening Gatha. Words can be found on page 41 of the Praises of the Buddha, Gatha book, and on your screen. Again, it's page 41.
Shadows o'er the earth are stealing, soon the darkness will descend. Gladly we around thee gather, teacher, master, guide and friend. When that last long darksome twilight all the lights of earth shall hide, truth within its arms shall hold us, bearing us across death's tide. Ever onward, ever upward, gently held in love's embrace, till we reach Nirvana's summit and behold truth face to face.
Please be seated. This morning, I am happy to introduce our guest speaker, Reverend Christina Moon from the Dai Honzan Chozen-ji, a Rizai Zen Buddhist temple on Oahu. After a career in human rights and social change, organizing and graduating from the Stanford University Graduate School of Business, Christina embarked on 3 years of monastic training at the Dai Honzan Chozen-ji in Honolulu. While still in residence as a priest, she continues to train in Zazen, Kendo, Chado, and ceramics. She now also works with individuals and organizations to develop the sensitivity and spiritual strength needed to lead in today's challenging world. Please give a warm welcome to Reverend Christina Moon.
Thank you, Reverend Hika, and thank you, Kona Honganji, for welcoming me today. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was very, very touched by all of the service so far. This is actually my first time ever seeing Jodo Shin service, and it felt really special to me. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. So on this occasion of Nirvana Day, I wanted to speak to a few more of Shakyamuni Buddha's last words that he said before he died, as recorded in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. So, as was said earlier, some 2,000 years ago, the Buddha lay dying. And after surveying his disciples to see if they had any questions or doubts remaining as to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, or the method that they should train in, he gave them one last instruction. And the actual words in the ancient Pali language, they get translated many ways, some of which are very cumbersome, like all compounded things are subject to vanish, strive with earnestness. So I wanted to try today to see if we can make these important words a little more accessible. And my hope is that after today, you might have a clearer understanding of how to practically implement Shakyamuni's words, as they're so important despite being a little hard to comprehend. Strive with earnestness. That last word in Pali is sampadetta. And I guess it's hard to translate because when I look it up, I see different connotations of earnestness, vigor, seriousness, and the understanding that I like to bring with it that feels more familiar is just sincerity. And you may know that the concept of sincerity has a lot of meaning and figures very importantly into Japanese language and culture. And I've learned mostly about this idea of sincerity through my Zen training, but also through some of my martial arts training, particularly with my Kendo sensei, Deku Teshima, who was born to a samurai family, but at about the age 10, moved to Hawaii. So he's really local, but also has this connection to Japan still. So sincerity has this multi-dimensional quality, as I've learned. The most common word for it is majime, which just means, sort of translates to earnestness. The actual kanji for it is literally a face, like the character for face, and then the character for not fake. So it kind of means authentic, or in English, maybe it would make sense with our idioms to have an honest face or to take something at face value. So it's that kind of meaning. I'm also a big fan of puns, and it turns out that majime is also a really good pun. In Japanese, majime is also how you say the phrase, closing the gap. So I imagine it's something maybe you'd hear in an announcement on like the Tokyo Metro, close the gap, mind the gap, or something like that. But I really like that you could hear majime and you could hear this idea of close the gap and sincerity at the same time in your mind, because to be a sincere person, you have to close the gap between what you say and what you do, the person you want to be, and how you actually conduct yourself. So it's a really good pun. Finally, there's also this version of sincerity in Japanese that's expressed, my kendo teacher taught me this very appropriately. It's expressed through the phrase shin-ken, which literally means live sword, or the character sometimes is heart sword. And what that means is like a live blade, a sword that is sharp enough to kill. And it speaks to the idea of sincerity as approaching things with the seriousness and attention that would be demanded in a situation where you could take a life, give a life. And it's really interesting to think about, how do we approach life with that kind of sincerity? It should arise genuinely, spontaneously, and maybe naturally after someone has closed that gap between how they want to act and how they actually act. And I really think it fits well with this encouragement from Shakyamuni on his deathbed. And it's an interesting way to reflect on how we can live up to his words. So when I think of Jodo Shin Buddhism, I always think of a story from my Zen teacher, Sayama Daian Roshi. Apparently, there was a sesshin, or intensive Zen training many years ago, where our two founders at Chozenji, Omori Sogen Rotaishi and Tonoi Tenshin Rotaishi, they spoke about this old parable of a devout old woman who passes away and finds herself stuck outside the gates of the Pure Land. And she protests and she pleads. She says, I really belong in there. And she has by her side this cart full of nembutsu that she points to. See, all the times I said, Namo Amida Buddha, all the times I invoked and prayed to Amida Buddha, she was very well known by everyone as a devout Buddhist. So the guard at the gate starts going through all these nembutsu, and he picks up one box, and then he throws it away. He says, it's empty. Picks up another one, says, it's empty, it's empty. And she really pleads, keep going, keep going. I said the nembutsu so many times with a lot of belief. Finally, they find one time that was really sincere. And it was a time when she was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, and she got caught in a thunderstorm. And this peal of thunder cracks through the sky, and she runs to a tree and hugs the tree and says, Namo Amida Butsu. And she says it really scared for her life. And they said this one was real. And with that, she was allowed into the Pure Land. I don't know if that's a real Jodoshin Buddhist story. It might have gotten corrupted through a couple of Zen teachers. but it is, I think it's a wonderful story that speaks to me about the power of the Nembutsu, the power of this sect of Buddhism to be able to be infused into your daily life with belief and with faith and with sincerity. So the hard thing about Shakyamuni's instruction and also about this story, or what this story sort of stands for me, is that it's really hard to rehearse or like practice this kind of sincerity. Oftentimes you cannot anticipate what the most challenging moment is going to be that will call on you to act in the way that befits who you think you are. And then it's hard to sort of practice how you'd like to respond. And then maybe you guys can relate to this. Maybe you've been in situations at work or somewhere else where you rehearse and you practice something many, many times, and then the real thing comes and something unexpected happens, or it doesn't quite turn out the way that you planned for. So maybe sincerity isn't a thing that can actually even be rehearsed. Maybe that takes away its realness and makes it more empty. But I do believe that there are ways we can prepare for those harder moments in our lives. We can be the people that we want to be. And the key is not to practice or to rehearse, but speaking from my experience and my tradition, we really focus on training ourselves for those moments. Training ourselves for those moments and all the variables and changes that we cannot predict or anticipate. We can train our bodies, we can train our minds, and we can especially train our spirits. So my temple Chosenji, which is very different from the Honganji, despite also being Buddhist, is a kind of monastery or dojo. But as you can tell by my hair, I'm not that kind of monk. Didn't have to shave it off. But we're a Rinzai Zen dojo, and we have all lay people, sort of similar to here, but we do a kind of training that is a monastic style of training. So it's pretty intense. We're very creative in coming up with these different ways for people to train. And our goal is to help people surpass their self-imposed limitations and really discover maybe where their real limit is, which often is much further than where they thought it was. In particular, we use methods like Zazen, seated meditation, but also the martial arts and the fine arts as ways to develop ourselves spiritually. So again, one of our founders, Omori Sogen, who is from Japan, he said that the greatest contribution he felt to human civilization from Japan was that the arts had been developed as what are called do, which is the Japanese word for the Tao in Chinese, certain universal principle or truth, very similar to the Dharma. So do, which essentially you can say it means the way. And the arts have been developed as ways, as do, to realize our true selves. So kendo isn't just swordsmanship or the technique of using a sword. It is the way of the sword. Cha-do isn't just Japanese tea ceremony. It's the way of realizing yourself, really knowing yourself through tea. Of course, for us, it all starts with zazen. We sit 45 minutes before every arts class. You're not allowed to move. It's a little intimidating, but almost everyone can do it. And the reason for this is that zazen is actually the easiest conditions under which you can experience what's called samadhi. And samadhi is another Pali word. And one way of understanding it is like relaxed concentration. And you might have experienced something like samadhi in your life, maybe in a moment when it felt like things are kind of moving in slow motion. You can see everything happening around you. Another way we understand this is being in the zone. You know, we can have little moments like that. Sometimes just when we're driving, sometimes when we're doing sports, sometimes if we're really engaged in a project and really focused, we experience samadhi. But it's really samadhi when you can make it happen. It doesn't just happen. So zazen is the easiest conditions under which to experience samadhi, but it's hard to translate that from sitting on a soft cushion where nobody's talking to you and you don't have to do anything except maybe watch your breath and your posture, concentration. How do you translate that into like regular life, like traffic maybe? So the arts are really good here because they're a way of helping you experience samadhi in activity. Our head priest at Chozenji puts it this way. He says, you know, it's really easy to be calm and in control when you're sitting on a cushion, but can you do it with a sword at your throat? Can you do it with a brush in your hand? So training in a do or a way provides not just a conceptual understanding, but actually the lived experience of Zen and Buddhist principles. You learn the interdependence and interplay between, for example, essence and form. But most importantly, you can learn how, in the face of changing circumstances and uncertainty, to have an immovable mind and spirit. For me, by challenging myself through these ancient, time-tested arts like kendo and chado, a lot more of what Shakyamuni may have referred to as striving earnestly or striving sincerely has become accessible. And it's within reach on a more regular basis. And practically speaking, I found more of the spiritual strength to really just keep going even when I'm exhausted and to not quit. And then I've gotten better at just letting things go when they're not useful, when they're causing suffering to myself or others, or when they just don't matter anymore. And then I find it easier to live fully, moment by moment, serving a bowl of tea with everything I've got, for example, in the same way that I would bring my whole self and everything I've got to kendo keiko, sparring in kendo. The more I do these things, the more compassion and connection also arise spontaneously and from the heart. I can focus more on helping and taking care of others before myself, even if I'm sitting in seiza in chado and my legs are on fire or completely pins and needles, can still make the people around me not feel like, okay, hurry up, drink your tea. But more this feeling of like, everything is great. This is for you. And I want you to be comfortable. That's the most important thing. In kendo, you might not imagine that this is possible, but in kendo, similarly, amidst the noise, it's very loud kendo class. A lot of people yelling, stomping, shinai, hitting each other. And it can feel a little overwhelming and chaotic. But the more I train, actually, the more I find in the middle of sparring and kendo, everything else can disappear. I just focused on my opponent and the connection between us, what we can share in that moment. And it can be actually really beautiful, really sweet. So I feel tremendously lucky that all of these things I just named as methods and disciplines to approach Shakyamuni's instruction, that they've been available to me, but I remember days like when I went to school and worked on the mainland when these things weren't available to me. Maybe for that reason, I feel really fortunate to be in Hawaii, where Buddhism is the second largest religion and where our culture and our heritage is a little more accessible to us, has been preserved and respected more than in other places, particularly on the continent. We should really cherish these aspects of the cultures we come from, not just because they're own and personal to us in some way, but for those of us who come from cultures that have been Buddhist for a long time, sometimes thousands of years. We should really look at some of these cultural practices or the arts like this as things that arose out of Buddhism, out of a Buddhist culture, and as means for us to experience the teachings of the Buddha, maybe without words, but just actually with our bodies in a different sense of knowing. Through our culture, whether it's our values and accepted behaviors, or our food, or our traditions, or our arts, we can learn to be Buddhas. We can learn to strive earnestly and remember that the nature of all things is to be constantly changing. Our traditions, but I really think in particular our arts. This is my experience. They need to be maintained and passed down to future generations. And again, not just because they're cool, not because they're ours, but because they play an important role in developing human beings and human consciousness. In Zen, we call this approach to spiritual development shugyo. It doesn't have a direct translation to English. It's one of 6 words or terms that describe spiritual development. And it is, among those 6, it's the deepest. And so the best way to translate it is really, it's just the deepest possible spiritual training or development. And essentially what shugyo is it's what you have when your spiritual development becomes your life, and your life is your spiritual development or training. We're all here to learn how to be free and happy, and I mean this in the most universal and transcendent sense. Free and happy, that means even on the hardest days of our lives. Shakyamuni's appeal to us to remember that everything is impermanent, and essentially to do shugyo, to train hard, is accessible to all of us. It's not easy, of course. Nothing worth doing usually is. But really, everything we need to realize our true selves, like Shakyamuni wanted, is right here. And we're especially lucky in Hawaii, as I said, that our ancestry and our culture allows opportunities for us to do this. And it's open to people who don't share that ancestry and culture as well. For many people, training in, for example, the fine arts and martial arts that developed as Do infused with Buddhism means that they're learning to be clearer and more sincere. And once you know what it means to train in a Do, maybe from, small kid time when you did judo or chado or kado, the way of the flower, you have a sense of what it would take to bring that same discipline and searching, always searching, never quite good enough, a little bit more towards perfection. You know what it's like to actually bring that maybe into your everyday activities. You can make dishwashing a Do. Can take any activity, running a company or a business, a way to realize yourself. As precious as this all is, it's also fleeting. Even the average lifespan, 80-some years, it's not that long. We don't know what tomorrow brings. So right here, right now, What does it mean to you to be sincere about being totally free and happy? What's in the way? Let it go. Like the native Hawaiian spiritual leader Nanaviri said, you have to let it go like it's a hot coal. Just let it go. Don't hold on to it. Maybe you could even think of it as letting go with the urgency of real life or death. It's actually that important. This hang up I have, I gotta just attack it and let it go. If we can do that, we might find ourselves a step closer to satisfying Shakyamuni's words, closing the gap between our intentions and our hope and our action, living more clearly and more sincerely in our day-to-day dealings, as well in the pursuit of life's ultimate potential, which is to be a Buddha. And that has benefits for our mundane day-to-day lives, the manini things, but also the greatest opportunity we all have, which is to be free and happy. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful message, Reverend Moon. We all got great pleasure of you coming here from Oahu and speaking to us today on Super Bowl Sunday. Now we'll have Myrna Kunihiro, who will lead us in unison reading The Eightfold Path to Happiness. The words can be found on the handouts and on the TV screen.
Good morning. Eightfold Path to Happiness. The teachings of the Buddha help us to understand the oneness of all life. To lead us in the right direction, the Buddha provided us with the Eightfold Path, right views, to keep free of prejudice and superstition and to see the true nature of life, right thoughts, to turn our minds away from violence and hatred, right speech, to refrain from harmful talk and to use our words wisely, right conduct, to see that our deeds come from peace and goodwill, to grow every day in Buddha's teachings, right livelihood, to try to earn our living in such a way that avoid causing suffering, right energy, to use our energies to promote the overcoming of ignorance and destructive desires, right mindfulness, to cherish a good mind, for all that we think and do has its roots in the mind, right meditation, to study the teachings of the Buddha and to practice them to the best of our abilities. May the presence of the Buddha, who said that he would live in his teachings, be our guide. May we follow this path until we too realize nirvana. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Myrna. We will now have the offertory presentation. Mahalo, everyone, for your kind generosity. We will conclude this service with the singing of the Gatha Nembutsu. Please rise.
Namannavu, 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 namannavu.
You may be seated. This concludes today's Nirvana Day service. Here are some announcements. Next Sunday, February 19th, will be our annual Kyodan membership meeting and luncheon. At 10 a.m., we will start with a short service in remembrance of Sangha members who have passed away last year. Honor our Keirokai members who have reached the age of 80 and welcome new members. The membership meeting will occur after the service, which will then be followed by a New Year's luncheon with Ono food, fellowship, and lucky number drawings. We hope you have already registered with your head count, but even if you forgot, please join us because we always have extra food. On Sunday, February 26th, there will be a regular Dharma family service at 10 a.m. BWA will hold their membership meeting after the service. Ishini and Kagushini Day service, sponsored by the BWA, will be held on Sunday, March 5th. Guest speaker will be Reverend Charlene Kihara from Hawaii Betsuin. Save the date for this year's Hawaii Association of International Buddhists, or HAIB, Buddha Day service, which will be held Sunday, March 12th at 9:30 here at Kono Honganji. This year's theme is Buddhism and Mental Health and features a speaker, a clinical psychologist, Dr. Bart Aoki, who is the son of the late Kazuyoshi and Ethel Aoki. He will speak on resilience in our lives. Please encourage all your family and friends to attend this service and support our local homegrown guest speaker. Let's see, reminders. About if you should have gotten an email that has attachments on Reverend Blaine's weekly update. It was mailed or emailed this past Thursday. And if you have not already done so, please pick up your pre-ordered 2023 Hopo Honganji Mission of Hawaii calendars, as well as the 125th anniversary souvenir booklet, an appreciation gift, and free COVID test kits. The 125th anniversary merchandise items are also still available for purchase. Any other announcement, Reverend Blaine?
Thank you, everybody. I want to just thank Reverend Moon for joining us, my good friend, Christina. Thank you for sharing the Dharma with us today. And the story, the parable that you shared about the Jodo Shinshu woman reminds me of a teaching of Shinran Shonin, right? This idea of a one thought moment that we have when we say the Nembutsu from deep within, that arises from this mind of true and trusting, a mind of Shinjin, right? Which leads us to a life of naturalness, or a life of sincerity, a life of authenticity. And this is what we can practice every day. And so I'm so glad that you're able to share how we can live, how we can practice these teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha in our daily lives. You know, while we come from different traditions, we all are disciples of Shakyamuni, and we all go back to the historical Buddha as our teacher and as our guide. That's why we go to the three treasures and take refuge in them every week. And so thank you again for being here and for joining us today. Mahalo.
Do we have any other announcements? Thank you, Reverend Christina Moon, again for a wonderful message today. For those of you on Zoom, click on Leave Meeting button when you're ready to leave. Those of you here in person, refreshments will be served in the conference room in the back. A big mahalo to Susan Takeue, Linda Nagai, and Molly Nakano for providing the goodies today. And thank you for joining us. Please stay safe, and we hope to see you at next week's annual Kyodan Membership Service meeting and luncheon. Thank you.
Namandam, namandam, namandam.